same overpriced seafood restaurant in Santa Barbara where we'd gathered every summer since I was a kid. Uncles boasted about real estate flips, aunties flashed new diamond tennis bracelets, and my cousins expertly dropped phrases like IPO and private equity into casual conversation. "Still driving that old Civic, Elena?" my cousin Marcos called out across the table, his voice oozing with the usual mix of fake concern and smug superiority. "I know a guy at Audi who could hook you up." I gently adjusted the cuff of my pale blue blouse, revealing just a flash of the watch beneath. "The Civic's still running great," I replied calmly. "So responsible," Aunt Gloria said, sipping her rosé. "But, with your software job, surely you could splurge a little." I smiled lightly. My software job, as they casually dismissed it, was the AI infrastructure company I'd founded 3 years ago. The same company that had just closed a $180 million, 0 cents Series C round. The reason I was wearing a Moritz Grossmann Tremblant Minute repeater, one of only 12 ever crafted by hand. Most collectors wouldn't even dream of holding one. Speaking of work, Uncle Javier chimed in. "Marcos just got promoted to VP at Santander, first one in the family to get an executive suite." The table erupted into applause. Marcos gave a humble little wave and tugged down the sleeve, hiding his tag here. "Not bad, if you liked mass production." "And how about you, Elena?" my dad asked, his voice lined with skepticism. "Still doing your little coding thing?" I was about to reply when the waiter arrived with a fresh tray of lobster. I reached for the butter dish, and this time my sleeve slid back fully. Dad saw it. His fork stopped mid-air. His face went pale. "Elena," he said, barely above a whisper. "That watch." The entire table froze. My father had collected high-end timepieces for decades, before the 2008 crash forced him to sell them all. He knew exactly what was on my wrist. "That's a Moritz Grossmann minute repeater," he muttered, stunned. "Those go for 2.3 million. Marcos interrupted, finally grasping the significance. "Give or take," I added with a shrug. "Depends on who's bidding." The silence was thick. Aunt Gloria's Cartier bangle looked suddenly plastic. Uncle Javier shifted uncomfortably in his monogrammed loafers. "Oh, this old thing?" I said sweetly, mimicking Aunt Gloria's earlier tone about her custom Hermès. I didn't need to explain further. The rest of the evening was quieter. The usual comparisons and backhanded compliments dried up. For once, I wasn't the underestimated cousin with the cute tech job. I was the one who wore something no one at that table could afford without saying a word. And that was worth more than any applause. "Just something I picked up at auction last month," I said casually, gently turning my wrist. But how?" Mom stammered, her voice cracking. "You take the bus." I took a long sip of my jasmine tea, savoring the silence that followed. "Ever wonder why I take the bus?" I asked. "Because I'm usually on calls with our Tokyo office. Can't exactly do that behind the wheel." "Tokyo office?" Marcus's grin faltered. The smugness wiped clean from his face. "Wait, what exactly does your software job do?" I unlocked my phone, my 3-year-old Pixel, the same one they'd mocked earlier for not being an iPhone, and pulled up our latest investor report. "We build AI-driven financial trading systems," I said, turning the screen toward him. "Our architecture supports high-frequency algorithmic trades across Asian and European markets." Marcos leaned in. His expression shifted as he read. "Wait, you power these?" "Actually, we probably run back-end optimization for a good chunk of the same systems you use at Santander," I said with a smile. Uncle Javier, who had been peeking over Marcos's shoulder, suddenly coughed. "Is this right?" he asked, voice cracking. "Your valuation, this says." 10 billion pre-money, I nodded, 11.2 after last month's Series C round. "But you know, valuations shift." I glanced at Marcos. "Right?" His tag Heuer looked plastic under the downlight. Dad was still staring at my wristwatch, his old passion long buried. He had taught me everything I knew about horology back when we'd sneak off to estate auctions together, long before the crash erased his collection and his trust in anything risky. "The auction," he said quietly. "Christie's? Last month?" I nodded. "Anonymous bidder." I knew it, he whispered, awe creeping into his voice. It was your dream piece, Mom said, more softly now. Before everything. I looked her in the eye. I know. That's why I bought it. For a while, the only sound was the soft clinking of chopsticks and muffled murmurs for more ginger sauce. The usual shouting over whose bonus was bigger had died off completely. Even Marcos looked like he'd lost his appetite. So, Uncle Javier finally ventured, trying for casual. This company of yours, it's doing well? My phone buzzed again, internal from our London office. We process about 30% of AI-driven trades in Asia, I said, glancing at the notification. Probably closer to 40% once next month's merger goes through. Merger? Marcos leaned forward, his banker instincts flaring. With who? Can't say yet, I replied, grinning, but you'll probably see it on the front page of the Financial Times soon. His face went pale. The quantum trade acquisition? He whispered. That's your company? Dad straightened in his chair, startled. Quantum trade? The Singapore firm disrupting the entire South Asian market? Among other things, I said, deliberately vague. The NDA wouldn't lift until next week. Aunt Gloria, who'd spent most of the evening sipping wine and dismissing me with polite pity, now leaned forward, her tone curious. Elena, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been building all this? I folded my napkin slowly, since before anyone at this table thought I was doing more than playing with code. If you felt that shift at the table, the silence, the reckoning, just wait until they find out who's backing our next move. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the Rivera name echoes far beyond this dining room. But Elena, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? Mom's voice trembled, eyes glossy. All this time, we thought, that I was struggling, I said gently. That I took the bus because I couldn't afford a car? I adjusted my watch again, letting the warm chandelier light glint across the dial's impossibly intricate details. Sometimes success doesn't need to be announced, I said softly. Uncle Javier leaned in suddenly, his tone attempting to sound casual. Speaking of announcements, my portfolio could use some diversification. Maybe we could talk opportunities sometime? Sorry, I replied politely but firmly. We're fully funded. A beat passed. Last round was oversubscribed by about $3 billion. Silence. Again. $3 billion in oversubscription was more than the combined worth of every trust fund at that table. Mom reached across and touched my wrist with a tenderness I hadn't felt in years. But mija, why keep all of this a secret? I met her eyes, because I needed to build something real. I didn't want to perform success for validation. I wanted to earn it. Dad hadn't said a word in minutes. He was still staring at my wristwatch, his expression conflicted. Somewhere between awe and ache. The auction, he finally murmured. There was a bidding war. It went way over the estimated value. I know, I said with a small smile. He looked up slowly. You were the other bidder. There were two, I nodded. And I wasn't going to let anyone else walk away with your dream watch. Realization hit him fully. His shoulders slumped. You drove up the price. On purpose. I had to, I shrugged. Some things are priceless, Dad. Across the table, Marcos cleared his throat, clearly trying to salvage his pride. Well, at Santander we always say... Actually, I interrupted, glancing at a fresh email on my phone. Your global desk just signed with our algorithmic platform. The transition memo goes out Monday. Marcos deflated like a pricked balloon. Aunt Gloria, always quick to pivot when the wind shifted, tried a new angle. Elena, you must join us at the Montecito Country Club next weekend. There's someone I think you'd absolutely love to meet. Very influential. Can't, I said, rising from my chair. Flying to Singapore Sunday night. Board meeting. Your company's board? Uncle Javier asked, his voice tight. No, my jets, I said, calmly. Though I usually take the bus to LAX. Better for the environment. After dinner, while everyone gathered their cashmere wraps and valet tickets, Dad followed me outside. The coastal breeze cut through the air, laced with sea salt and something unspoken. "This watch," he said finally, exhaling a cloud of visible breath. It was the one in my study, the photo I kept for 20 years. "I know," I said, hands tucked into my coat pockets. "I saw it every time I visited. You never said it, but I always knew it meant something more than money." "Right up until the crash forced you to sell your collection," I said. Dad winced. The 2008 collapse hadn't just taken our family's financial cushion, it had reshaped him. From a man who once spoke passionately about rare timepieces and mechanical ingenuity, he became someone who, gently but firmly, steered his children towards safe careers. Banking, law, accounting, stability over passion. "Is that why you bought it?" he asked, voice quiet now. "To prove something?" I slowly pulled back my sleeve, letting the moon phase complications shimmer under the streetlight's glow. "No," I said, "not to prove anything. I bought it because every time I visited your study as a kid, you'd point to the picture of this watch. You said only 16 people in the world would ever own it, that it wasn't about price, it was about craft, legacy, precision." He blinked a few times, his jaw tightened, not with pride or anger, but with the emotion he'd learned to hide behind firm handshakes and retirement calculators. "I remember," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "When I started over in 9, I kept a copy of that photo too. Not to chase wealth, but to remind myself what it meant to build something perfect. Something rare." Just then, Marcos and Uncle Javier burst out of the restaurant, both of them glued to their phones, muttering about valuations and platform equity exposure, no doubt already trying to contact analysts about my company. Behind them, Aunt Gloria stood beside Mom, showing her pictures on her phone, likely of some single acquaintance she thought I should meet. "Here," I said, reaching for the buckle of my watch, "it was always meant to be yours." Dad took a step back. "No," he said firmly, voice breaking. "It's too much." "I bought 2 at the auction," I replied, smiling. "This one's yours. Mine's in Singapore." "You bought 2? One for each continent," I shrugged. "Balance." His hands trembled slightly as he accepted the watch. He turned it over reverently, like an artifact from a past life finally returned home. "But 2 of these? $4 million, give or take," I said casually. "About what I make in interest each month." He looked stunned. "Some things," I added, "are worth more than money." Mom finally made her way over, her voice just a little too cheerful. "Elena, dear, look at this photo Aunt Gloria just showed me. Isn't this girl lovely? Her family owns a vineyard in Paso Robles." "Sorry, Mom," I said, pulling out my old Pixel. "I'm already seeing someone. She's the head of AI research at MIT. We met at a conference, I was the keynote." Several heads around us whipped around in unison, as if synchronized. Whispers started, eyes darting. Dad just chuckled under his breath, cradling the watch in his palm. "You know," he said, "I always wondered why you spent so much time with computers instead of following Marcos into finance." "Remember what you used to say about this watch?" I asked. "That it wasn't valuable because of its price, but because it embodied someone's relentless pursuit of perfection?" He nodded slowly. "That's what I've built," I said. "Not just another trading company. Something exact. Something elegant. Something that changes the way the entire financial world operates." My phone buzzed again. The Singapore markets were opening. Dad glanced down and smiled. "You should go," he said quietly. "The markets wait for no one." "Actually," I said, reaching into my coat pocket, I pulled out 2 tickets. I handed them to my dad. "Why don't you and Mom come to Singapore next week? See what your daughter actually built. First class, of course." Mom's eyes widened. "On your jet?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "No," I said with a sly grin. "On the bus." She blinked. "Kidding," I laughed. "Yes, on my jet." As we exchanged goodbyes, I could hear Marcos behind us, speaking a little too loudly to Uncle Javier, downplaying his promotion. "Well, you know, junior partner at Santander isn't what it used to be. Titles are so fluid these days." Aunt Gloria, suddenly tech curious, had pulled out her phone and was deep into an article titled Top 10 Fastest Growing AI Startups of the Year. My cousins huddled near the valet stand, whispering and frantically searching my name online. But none of that mattered. What mattered was watching Dad lean in to show Mom the watch, his watch, explaining the moon phase dial and tourbillon function with the same animated wonder I remembered from when I was 10, perched beside him at the dining room table, listening to stories of horology and craftsmanship. Some things are worth more than money. Like seeing your father realize that not only did his daughter succeed, but she did it without ever abandoning the values he passed down: patience, precision, pride in doing things the right way. Later that evening, I did what I always did. I took the bus home. No fanfare, no tinted windows, just a quiet ride under the Santa Barbara night sky. But this time, instead of catching up on work, I scrolled through old photos of Dad's watch collection. Grainy pictures, taken before the recession forced him to sell them one by one. One piece had been sold to pay the mortgage, another to cover my brother's tuition. Now I was planning how to rebuild it, not to show off, but to give something back that really mattered. One masterpiece at a time. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't flashy. It's quiet, purposeful, restorative. It's not about proving the critics wrong, it's about honoring the people who believed in you, even when they couldn't show it. And sometimes, just sometimes, taking the bus doesn't mean you're broke. It means you're building something so big, so meaningful, that you don't need anyone's approval to know your worth. If you followed me this far, thank you. You've seen the polite insults, the quiet dismissals, the way success can go unseen when it doesn't come in the form others expect. But you've also seen what happens when we stop seeking validation and start building from purpose. I wasn't loud about my wins because I didn't need to be. I let my work speak. And in a world obsessed with appearances, that's an act of rebellion. So, if you saw a part of yourself in me, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to take the safe path, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment, tell me your story, and if you believe in what I'm building, not just in business, but in values, hit that subscribe button. Let's grow this community of quiet strength and undeniable excellence. And here's my advice, from one quiet fighter to another. Don't waste your energy proving people wrong. Use it to build something so right that the world can't look away. Don't let doubt, especially from those closest to you, drown out the sound of your own instinct. The same people who dismiss your journey now may one day ask how you did it. Support doesn't always come from where you expect, but sometimes, just by sharing your truth, you inspire others to step into theirs. So keep showing up, keep building, keep going. And I promise, when the world finally turns to listen, your silence will have spoken volumes. Subscribe now if you're ready to rewrite your story too. I'm just getting started. And I'd love for you to come with me.